Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. We're going to talk about medical assistance in end of life stuff and regulation a little bit. I'm riffing on something, and I'm going to do another recording, probably longer, probably more in depth, over on the Substack because, well, I'm limited here. YouTube is going to mess with whatever I say. So I can't use certain words and I can't talk about certain concepts, so it's going to go over there. So this comes out of a post from ESR, that's Eric S. Raymond, open source libertarian occult guy, and Neil Asher, who is a rather famous science fiction author who we comment on each other's stuff periodically. It's not like I knew him, but he's a good guy, he's a good author, but he's British. And that's actually going to be a big part of the conversation when we talk about the subject later. Because right now, in England, they're getting ready to do a big vote about legalizing assisted end-of-life things. Like Canada's MAID thing. There's a difference between freedom and regulation. That's really what I'm going to talk about. But so Asher, he had a massively traumatic experience with his wife. She died, and it was ugly and brutal, and it would have been much nicer for them both if she had been permitted to end the process with less suffering. And okay, that's totally valid, but the problem with what happens when governments step in and allow, regulate, bureaucratize, fund, committee this stuff is that it's not a freedom, it's a regulation. And I'm going to pivot to talking about something else that I can talk about a little more freely on the YouTube side, because it's an analogy that I think is very important. And we'll tie it all together, hopefully, in the end. And that's pot, all right? In most states, in the United States that have quote-unquote legalized pot is not legal. It's regulated. And there's a huge difference there, okay? It's regulated and controlled. There's a big difference between governmental healthcare assisted end-of-life stuff and freedom of choice. There's a big difference between government regulated and controlled access to marijuana and legalized pot. Freedom to do whatever it is you do. Eat it, smoke it, grow it. Okay? And so I've lived in several states that have these controls, and none of them are legal. In no case can you just do what you want to do. You have to go to special places to purchase it. There's special ID scans, and sometimes they record your ID so that you're a known user. There's they keep record of who goes through. They don't just scan the ID to say, oh, you are 21. No, there's different states, they have record keeping of who goes, how often they go, stuff like that. There's taxes. The taxes are insane. Like you'll have a sales tax and this tax and that tax, and then an excise tax of 10, 15, or 20% on top of that. And unlicensed dispensaries will be raided, and the feds get called in to help with that because they really want to punish you if you're not paying the appropriate fees, because it's regulated. Quantities, how much you can buy, when you can buy, stuff like that. So if you live, just an example from Nevada, if you live way out there, all right, and a lot of people in Nevada live way out there, you can buy, I think it's a maximum of 1 ounce worth of stuff, something like that, in a given day. So if you live in Alpine and you use the stuff for whatever purpose. Like, you can say it's recreational, but you use the stuff because it helps you with migraines, okay, or your period, whatever. And you only go to town because Alpine, it's going to be 6-hour drive to the nearest dispensary minimum, okay? Because not all counties have dispensaries and so on and so forth. 6-hour drive minimum, probably closer to 8, because you're going to have to go to Reno. So you are prohibited from purchasing enough to last you for whatever length of time. Like, this isn't enough to... You're restricted. It's a restriction, right? It's not freedom, it's control. In some places, so Nevada again, you are allowed to grow a couple of plants if you live far enough from a dispensary. Otherwise, it's illegal to grow. You can possess, there's also a limit on possession, how much you can possess at a given time. Like, all this stuff is control, bureaucracy, regulation. And it's done for the purpose of profit, at least in part, profit. Okay, control and profit. There's a power to it. There's a political power to it. You can shut it down. You can turn it up. You can modify it. You can change the codes. You can lottery the licenses. You can do a lot of money and power stuff with it. It's regulated. It's not freedom. It's regulation. Okay, it's not legalized. It's regulated, controlled. So, you get to a state like I believe Virginia. It's regulated, legalized, but you can't buy it. They did the regulation without allowing for a mechanism for purchase. So you're basically screwed on that, unless you have a medical card. Well, what they did was and this is like the worst of all possible worlds. They made it possible for you to, I guess, go to another state, which would be Maryland, and get some and then bring it back. Of course, Virginia doesn't let you buy liquor either. Like, they have tightly restricted hours on state-operated stores, and it's a bizarre, weird control and bureaucracy system. But that's the thing. It's not freedom of choice. It's government regulation. Now, to bring this to the end-of-life stuff, government regulation and assistance means that the government is now serving the purposes of the government. With marijuana, it's really simple stuff, right? It's really easy to see. Tax, code, it's all profit, 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 and control. They're going to consider it a sin tax or something. Sin tax, 2 words, not 1 word. So they want to tax it heavily. They want to restrict where you can buy it to try to control the population, because a lot of the politicians or their constituents believe that there's an inherent evil to this. So just like liquor, alcohol, the reason you still have such tight restrictions is because it's a power game, not just a profit game, but a power game, political power game. So what happens when you regulate and provide government assistance for end of life? You end up with the goals, the importances, the whole thing being about power, about profit, about control, about convenience. So, if you've got a person who's very young, like a baby, and there's a severe health issue, what you do is you decide that there's an incentive to go try to convince the parents that it would be better if some end-of-life care was provided instead of medical care. There's an incentive to that. There's an incentive to that because of, this is a kid who's going to be on Social Security disability. There's going to be all the school problems. It's going to reduce the school metrics for tracking purposes. There's just all this stuff. So you have incentives from the government side. to end it. On the healthcare side, you also have some incentives. Insurance, of course, money. It's all profit. Elder, when you get older, there's going to be a lot of that as well. One of Neil's arguments is that everyone spends the end of their life suffering and in pain and horrible, and you should just be able to make that choice. Okay. I'm going to have to talk about that more on the Substack, but there's a difference between making that choice and having the government step in and convince you. Remember that there was that case of that veteran in Canada. It's the famous case. It's not the only case, but it's probably the most famous one, where the veteran in a wheelchair was asking for financial assistance to build a wheelchair ramp in her house, and was advised that it would be cheaper and easier if she just ended it all. And that's the problem. That's, in a nutshell, that's the problem. The government can't compel you in most cases. Then there's the Netherlands, and they can compel you. They've actually, they will try to stop you from leaving the country to get a surgery for your child that is unauthorized. Like, that slippery slope, chain of consequences, call it what you will, that's part of the problem. What's part of the problem with the idea of assistance and regulation versus freedom of choice? Neil brings up a really great issue, which is how do you have freedom of choice without some very risky things, like, oh hey, a depressed teenager who broke up with his girlfriend goes to the drugstore and is like, hey, I want the end of life kit. Like, okay, you don't problems. But there's a difference between regulation and assistance and freedom of choice. I'm gonna get into this some more in the Substack. It'll take me probably a day or two to actually sit and record that, because that one's gonna be 30-40 minutes. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot to break down. I'm kind of just repeating some very simple stuff here because I'm limited by YouTube's censorship algorithm and process. But that's the government and the healthcare system and your doctor. Everyone has a different set of incentives, and they're going to put their incentives over you. They're going to make you, I've said this before, they're going to make you what is most useful to them, make your situation what is most useful to them. And that removes, and does not enhance, it removes freedom. So that's about it. Look forward to seeing something else, or you should look forward to listening to something else on the Substack. And I'm going to leave this for now, so stay sideways.